On March 28, 2025, a powerful earthquake tore through the heart of Myanmar. The 7.7 magnitude quake, centered in the country's central region, left a trail of devastation in its wake. Mandalay and Staggering, two of Myanmar's most populous cities, bore the brunt of the disaster. Buildings crumbled, homes were reduced to rubble, and thousands of lives were lost in the blink of an eye. The earthquake's impact was swift and brutal. The ground shook with such force that even those far from the epicenter felt its tremors. In the affected regions, scenes of chaos and destruction unfolded. Dust filled the air, sirens wailed, and panicked residents scrambled for safety. The once familiar landscape was now unrecognizable, scarred by the earthquake's raw power. The death toll soared past 2,700, with countless others injured or missing. Hospitals, already strained by years of political turmoil and a global pandemic, were overwhelmed with the influx of casualties. Rescue workers, hampered by a lack of equipment and resources, toiled tirelessly to pull survivors from the wreckage. Families were torn apart, homes were destroyed, and the future seemed uncertain. In the wake of the devastating earthquake, the already simmering tensions in Myanmar reached a boiling point. The military junta, which seized power in 2021, faced a wave of criticism over its handling of the disaster. Many accused the regime of being slow to respond and of prioritizing its own interests over the needs of the people. The lack of adequate equipment and resources hampered rescue efforts, further fueling public anger. With each passing hour, the chances of finding survivors dwindled, and frustration with the government's perceived inaction grew. The government's attempts to control the narrative and downplay the extent of the damage backfired, further eroding public trust. Social media platforms, though heavily censored, became outlets for citizens to express their anger and share harrowing accounts of the disaster. The slow and inadequate response to the crisis stood in stark contrast to the swiftness with which the military had cracked down on dissent in the past. The earthquake had exposed the junta's vulnerabilities, both logistical and in terms of public support, intensifying the pre-existing resentment towards their rule. As Myanmar grappled with the aftermath of the devastating earthquake, an element of intrigue emerged alongside the grief and despair. The disaster, striking just a day after the military's Armed Forces Day celebrations, ignited a wave of superstition and astrological interpretations. Many within Myanmar, steeped in Buddhist traditions and ancient beliefs, saw the earthquake as more than just a natural disaster. Whispers of it being an ill omen, a sign of divine displeasure against the ruling military junta, spread like wildfire. These beliefs were further fueled by the timing of the earthquake, so close to the junta's display of military might. Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, the head of the military junta, is known for his strong belief in astrology and numerology. The earthquake, occurring on a Friday under a new moon, was interpreted by some astrologers as a harbinger of significant change. Predictions of scarcity, rising prices, and even a potential change in leadership began to circulate. Social media, despite being heavily monitored and censored, became a breeding ground for these interpretations and predictions. Section 4. A History of Omens. When leaders fear the supernatural, the tendency to interpret natural disasters as omens or signs of divine displeasure is deeply rooted in Myanmar's history and culture. This is not the first time a natural disaster has been linked to the fate of its rulers. Previous military leaders such as Ne Win and Than Shwe were known to be deeply superstitious and influenced by astrologers. Ne Win, who ruled Myanmar for decades, was notorious for his reliance on numerology and astrology. He made significant decisions based on astrological readings, even going so far as to introduce banknotes with denominations divisible by his lucky number, 9. Than Shwe, another military strongman who ruled Myanmar, was also known to be influenced by astrological predictions. These historical precedents have shaped the way many in Myanmar perceive the recent earthquake. The belief that the earthquake is a sign of discontent from a higher power resonates with the historical narrative of leaders being influenced by, and sometimes even beholden to, the supernatural. Section 5. Echoes of Discontent, Personal Stories of Loss and Frustration. Beyond the political interpretations and astrological predictions, the true cost of the earthquake is measured in the countless personal tragedies that unfolded across the affected regions. The stories of ordinary people who lost loved ones, homes, and livelihoods serve as poignant reminders of the human toll exacted by this disaster. Kolin Ma, a resident of Mandalay, recounted the harrowing experience of frantically digging through the rubble of his collapsed home, desperately searching for his family. He spoke of the agonizing wait for help that never seemed to arrive, his frustration and despair growing with each passing hour. Daw I Theta, a young mother from Staggering, shared her heartbreaking tale of losing her child in the earthquake. She spoke of the chaos and confusion that reigned in the aftermath, the desperate search for medical attention, and the overwhelming grief of losing her child. These personal accounts, filled with grief, loss, and a sense of abandonment, serve as powerful indictments of the military junta's handling of the crisis. They provide a human face to the statistics, reminding us that behind the numbers are real people whose lives have been irrevocably changed by this tragedy. Section 6. The weight of grief, navigating loss and uncertainty. As the initial shock of the earthquake began to subside, the people of Myanmar found themselves facing the daunting task of rebuilding their lives amidst unimaginable loss and uncertainty. The weight of grief hung heavy in the air, a palpable sorrow that permeated every aspect of their existence. The process of mourning was compounded by the sheer scale of the devastation. Entire communities were left reeling, their social fabric torn apart by the loss of friends, neighbors, and loved ones. The familiar rhythms of life were disrupted, replaced by a somber silence punctuated by the sounds of rubble being cleared, and the mournful cries of those who had lost everything. The trauma of the event, the loss of loved ones, and the uncertainty of the future left many grappling with anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. The earthquake's impact extended far beyond the immediate aftermath, casting a long shadow over the lives of those who survived. The resilience of the human spirit, however, shone through as communities came together to support one another, sharing their grief and offering solace in the face of unimaginable loss. Section 7. A catalyst for change, the earthquake's political ripple effect. The devastating earthquake in Myanmar, while a natural disaster, has sent shockwaves through the country's political landscape. The military junta, already facing international condemnation and internal resistance, now finds itself at a crossroads. The earthquake has exposed the regime's vulnerabilities, amplified existing grievances, and fueled calls for change. The slow and inadequate response to the disaster, coupled with accusations of corruption and mismanagement of aid, has further eroded public trust in the military's ability to govern effectively. The earthquake has become a rallying point for the opposition, a symbol of the regime's alleged incompetence and disregard for the well-being of its citizens. The international community, already critical of the coup and the subsequent human rights abuses, has also voiced concerns over the junta's handling of the earthquake relief efforts. The disaster has brought renewed attention to the dire situation in Myanmar, potentially leading to increased pressure on the regime to allow greater humanitarian access and engage in meaningful dialogue with the opposition. The coming months will be crucial in determining whether this tragedy will lead to a more open and democratic Myanmar or further entrench the military's grip on power.